the graveyard of Christians in England. In the heart of a sleepy English village, nestled between rolling hills and ancient oaks, lay St. Mark's Cemetery, a graveyard that had stood for centuries. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, warning outsiders of the eerie occurrences that plagued its grounds. It was said that the spirits of those buried there never rested, and once the sun dipped below the horizon, the graveyard became a haven for the restless dead. Margaret Williams, a university student studying anthropology, had always been fascinated by the macabre. Drawn by the legends surrounding St. Mark's, she decided to spend her summer break in the village to research the cemetery's haunted history. Armed with her camera, notebook, and an unshakable curiosity, she rented a small cottage on the outskirts of the village. Margaret arrived in the village on a bright morning, the sun casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets. The villagers, wary of outsiders, eyed her with suspicion but answered her questions about the cemetery with a mix of reluctance and fear. An old woman named Edith, who ran the local inn, warned Margaret St. Mark's is no place for the living after dark. The spirits there are not kind. Ignoring the warnings, Margaret visited the graveyard during the day, finding it serene and beautiful. Ancient tombstones, covered in moss and ivy, stood like silent sentinels among the overgrown grass. The names and dates on the stones were barely legible, eroded by time and the elements. Margaret felt a chill despite the warm sunlight, an unshakable sense of being watched. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to spend a night in the graveyard. As dusk approached, she packed her equipment and made her way to St. Mark's. The village grew silent, and a thick fog began to roll in, blanketing the cemetery in a ghostly shroud. Margaret set up her camera near an old mausoleum, its stone walls cracked and weathered. The first few hours were uneventful. Margaret scribbled notes by the light of her lantern, detailing the history of the cemetery and its notable residents. Midnight approached, and the temperature dropped sharply. A sudden gust of wind extinguished her lantern, plunging her into darkness. She fumbled with her flashlight, its beam piercing the fog, just enough to reveal her surroundings. Then she heard a faint whispering, barely audible over the rustling leaves. She strained to listen, her heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if numerous voices were speaking in unison. Margaret followed the sound, her flashlight flickering, casting eerie shadows on the tombstones. She reached an old, decrepit chapel at the far end of the graveyard, its stained glass windows shattered and doors hanging ajar. The whispers seemed to emanate from within. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and cobwebs draped the pews and altar like funeral veils. Margaret's flashlight illuminated the figure of a young woman in a tattered white dress standing at the altar. Her back was turned, but Margaret could see her long, dark hair cascading down her shoulders. "Hello," Margaret called out, her voice trembling. The woman turned slowly, revealing hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, the whispers filled the chapel, growing louder, almost deafening. Margaret realized the whispers were coming from the woman, her voice fractured and multiplied. "Who are you?" Margaret managed to ask. The woman stepped forward, her feet not touching the ground. "I am Eleanor," she whispered, her voice echoing eerily. "I was wronged, and now I seek justice." Eleanor's story unfolded in fragmented whispers. She had been a young bride, betrayed and murdered by her husband on their wedding night. Her body had been buried in the graveyard, her soul trapped, unable to find peace. The whispers were the voices of other restless spirits, also seeking justice for their untimely deaths. Margaret's heart ached for Eleanor, but fear gripped her as the whispers intensified. "What can I do to help?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. Eleanor extended her hand, a spectral light emanating from her palm. "Bring him to justice. Only then will we be free." Before Margaret could respond, a cold hand gripped her shoulder, pulling her back. She spun around to see a shadowy figure with glowing red eyes, its face twisted in rage. The whispers turned into screams as the spirits surged forward, surrounding Margaret. She felt their anger and despair, their need for retribution. With a surge of adrenaline, Margaret broke free and ran out of the chapel. The fog had thickened, turning the graveyard into a labyrinth of shadows. She stumbled over tombstones, the whispers and screams echoing in her ears. She reached her camera, grabbed it, and fled the cemetery. Back at her cottage, Margaret reviewed the footage. The camera had captured everything: the whispers, Eleanor's apparition, and the shadowy figure. She knew she had to share the story, to bring light to the injustices that bound the spirits to the graveyard. Margaret contacted the local authorities, presenting her evidence. An investigation revealed the truth behind Eleanor's murder, leading to the arrest of a distant relative who had continued the family's dark legacy. With justice finally served, Margaret returned to the graveyard one last time. As she stood among the tombstones, the air felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and for the first time, she felt a sense of peace. Margaret placed a bouquet of flowers on Eleanor's grave, whispering a silent promise to remember their story. The spirits of St. Mark's cemetery found their rest, and the village of Greenwood once again knew peace. Margaret's research became a published work, shedding light on the forgotten history and bringing closure to the haunted graveyard. The tale of the graveyard of Christians in England became a testament to the power of truth and justice, forever etched in the annals of time.